Hi, I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, get ready to sink or swim. Taxi cab drivers bracing for a new open market in San Diego. We'll take a look at who will benefit and who may be left behind.
Cancer survival rates are better than they were decades ago, but what happens after you survive? I'm Peggy Pico with Life After Cancer and what one San Diego hospital is doing to provide post-cancer support. And on this Cesar Chavez holiday, we take a look at farm workers' conditions then and now.
Bring the GoPros to Coachella, but leave the selfie sticks at home. What may be behind the new ban at one of the biggest music festivals of the year? KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. The city of San Diego plans to block the use of city travel funds next week if the state of Indiana doesn't change its new policy toward same-sex couples. UT San Diego says Councilman Todd Gloria urged the mayor to issue an administrative order prohibiting city employees from traveling to Indiana until the law is changed. Now, several other cities have taken similar action, including San Francisco and Seattle. Indiana's governor defended the new religious freedoms law, but also called for clarification from lawmakers to address concerns that the law allows businesses to discriminate. Workers at the County Registrar of Voters office have a lot of counting to do. Opponents of the One Paseo development in Carmel Valley turned in more than 60,000 signatures to request a public vote on the project. Usually just a sample of those signatures are checked, but this time they will be checked one by one. That's because there was more than 29,000 requests to take back signatures. The results of the count will be announced April 24th. Changing the rules of the game, a long-standing cap on the number of taxis allowed in San Diego will be history beginning tomorrow. KPBS reporter Megan Burke shows us the opportunities for new drivers and the cab owners who say they're bracing for financial ruin.
For the past 3 decades, only about 1,000 taxi cabs were allowed to pick up passengers in the city. The permits for those cabs belong to people like Tesfam Debas.
To me, coming to America is opportunity of, dream of American dream.
Debas came to the United States from Eritrea about 30 years ago. Since then, he's sunk nearly $300,000 into 3 taxi cabs and the permits to operate them. His nest egg, we're riding in it.
Were you hoping to retire at 65?
The worst question. I don't like it.
Debas says the change to an open taxi market makes his investment nearly worthless. That's because he bought the permits for his cabs on an underground market. Officially, under the old system, when taxi permits were transferred from one person to another, the recipient paid a $3,000 fee to the city's transit agency. But the limited supply of permits gave rise to a secondary market where they were going for as much as $150,000. That unofficial system ends tomorrow, slashing the value of Debas's 3 permits.
Of course, business is risk, I know that. I didn't expect to destroy people, the city like that.
Debas and some 400 taxi cab owners currently hold all of the city's permits. They say the city's hands-off approach over 3 decades gave them no indication the underground permit market was unsanctioned. Debas says he would have finished his chemistry degree if he'd known just how risky his investment was.
My main concern to raise my kids, to be a good citizen, kids, to be well educated, to help the country, not to destroy them, throw them on the curb. I never think about it, but that's what happened right now.
Debas says the city's decision means his nest egg is gone.
Well, that was a result of a business model that they created. The city didn't really give them direction one way or another about trading under the table on these permits.
Councilwoman Marty Emerald pushed to open the taxi market in an effort to help drivers who lease cabs from permit holders like DeBus. A San Diego state study found many of them were earning less than minimum wage. Emerald expects those to be the people who will snap up the new permits.
I suspect the industry will go through some growing pains. There will be an adjustment of some kind. But many of the drivers who would be looking to get permits are already driving.
But permit holders worry the market will become oversaturated with new drivers. They say, just look at history.
San Diego's already been through this once.
Roger Teal has been studying the taxi industry for 4 decades. He watched when the city opened its taxi market in the early 80s, only to close it back up a few years later. Back then, the number of taxis more than doubled, and Teal says the 500 new cabbies headed straight to taxi queues at the airport.
They were huge. They were just really, they were so long that, that they had to have I suppose it's the Port Authority police out there to sort of chase cabs away from the end of the line because they were basically backing all the way up onto, I can't think of the big street that goes out to the airport. But yeah, it was a mess.
But a few things have changed since then. For one, the airport now has its own cap on the number of taxis allowed to pick up passengers. The airport is a big moneymaker for cabbies, and a closed market there could dissuade drivers from getting into the taxi business. And then there's the smartphone-based car services Uber and Lyft. Transportation experts say the real threat to traditional taxi owners is a market shift toward that kind of door-to-door model.
The question, though, becomes, can taxi operators replicate what Uber and Lyft are doing?
As the meter ticks up to $37, I asked DeBus what he's doing to prepare for the new open market.
Nothing. I will see what it's going to be. The only thing I'm going to wait.
Several cab owners and their representatives have asked the courts for an injunction on efforts to open the taxi market. Meanwhile, more than 700 drivers have told the city they plan to apply for their own permits starting tomorrow. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
KPBS photojournalist Nick McVicker helped produce that story. San Diego Gas and Electric has a new tool in its utility belt, drones. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, approved its request to use drones in the field. Now they can deploy a drone to check facilities in remote areas, or they could send a drone instead of a helicopter to inspect damage during an emergency. SDG&E says the approval builds on permission they got last year to test drones in the rural East County.
With this authorization that we received late last week, we will be able to fly drones within our entire service territory.
Only one other utility in the U.S. has such approval.
People say, how come you're still doing this? But I can't believe I did this when I was 20.
San Diego, get ready to rock today. The Rolling Stones announced Petco Park will be the first stop of its Zip Code tour. The Stones will be in town on May 24th, marking their only West Coast stop. This will be the band's first gig in San Diego in nearly a decade. Tickets go on sale later this month. The tour wraps up in July with a concert in Quebec. Well, if you were hoping to grab a selfie when headliners AC/DC rush the stage at Coachella, you'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. That's without a selfie stick. You can see the ban right now on the festival's website reading, "No selfie sticks and narcissists." KPBS culture reporter Angela Carone explains.
Organizers of Coachella have banned selfie sticks at the popular Desert Music Festival. Selfie sticks are long sticks that allow you to attach a camera or a phone to them so you can get a better shot of yourself. That's why they are sometimes referred to as narcissistics. Coachella draws up to 90,000 attendees in a weekend. I spoke with some concert goers who say selfie sticks are distracting and block the view. Others worry they could be dangerous as attendees dance and celebrate. Also on the list of banned items at Coachella, hula hoops, stuffed animals, Sharpies, and drones. Headliners at the festival include AC/DC, Jack White, and Drake. Coachella takes place over 2 weekends in Indio, California, and begins April 10th. Angela Carone, KPBS News.
Hikers and bikers now have new trails to explore along the city's northern landscape. KPBS Metro reporter Taryn Mento says it increases access to nature while also preserving it.
At Black Mountain Open Space Park, Rod Simmons looks out over a new set of trails that he helped create.
Every time I come out here, there's people coming out here and they're just like, oh my God, I didn't know this was here. It's just fantastic.
The 1.5-mile addition loops Black Mountain in Rancho Penasquitos and links it to a network of trails that stretch to the coast. Simmons and hundreds of other volunteers worked with San Diego park rangers to accomplish the task for just a few $1,000.
We probably moved 10 tons of rocks. We had quite steep hillsides to work with.
Simmons says the trails let San Diegans enjoy the area's natural resources, but they're also part of a regional plan to protect the open space.
Having a good trails plan, you actually you manage the traffic within the open space, rather than if you didn't have a plan, people would go, humans like to explore, and they're going to go in there and they're going to go everywhere.
A few minutes later, volunteer botanist Jerry Green pedaled up on his mountain bike for a routine survey of the area's plants.
So I'm looking, are there other new plants or endangered plants along the trail? Okay. There's not. It's perfectly okay.
Yeah.
Green says he's seen some unofficial trails that cut through sensitive areas, but the new paths respect the habitat and give San Diegans a peek into a unique range of plants and wildlife.
I've seen a really surprising number of reptiles and, game birds and all kinds of interesting things that you wouldn't see, anywhere else in the county.
That day, Green was on the hunt to photograph the seed pod of a chocolate lily. The new trails officially opened on Saturday, but Simmons says there's still plenty more miles to come. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
Tonight on KPBS, part 2 of the cancer documentary, The Emperor of All Maladies. Peggy Pico joins us with more on cancer treatments, how they are saving lives and creating new survivors.
Advances in cancer prevention and treatments are improving survival rates in the U.S. According to the American Cancer Society, more than 14 million Americans with a history of cancer were alive on January 1st of last year. Kay Clark, a breast cancer survivor who now works for San Diego's American Cancer Society, and Dr. Eric Rowland, an oncologist and palliative care provider at UC San Diego Moore's Cancer Center. Welcome to Evening Edition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Kay, you were diagnosed and treated for breast cancer back in 1992, and now you help other women who are breast cancer survivors or who have breast cancer. How have you seen the treatment and follow-up change over these last 20 years?
Immensely. Treatment has really taken on some new steps, which the doctor will address. I'm not going to get into the medical aspect, but I think that we are seeing people survive a lot longer with a lot better quality of life.
Now, you immediately, I understand, got involved with the program at the American Cancer Society called Reach to Recovery.
Yes.
How did that involvement with other breast cancer survivors, how did it affect your treatment and your recovery?
When I first got diagnosed and I had a visit from a Reach to Recovery woman, that it gave me a very uplifting feeling, as though if I was looking at somebody who survived, I could survive it too. That she had had a very full life after cancer, and that gave me a great deal of hope. And that's what I wanted to give back to women with the program.
And I understand you're still friends after all these years.
Yes.
With that person.
Yes, we are.
Dr. Rowland, so Kay is a 22-year cancer survivor, and more people are surviving cancer, in fact, as we see. How do survival rates compare today to when you began practicing medicine like just a decade ago in general?
Well, over my lifetime, for overall, looking at all cancer types, 5-year survival has increased from 50% to almost 65%. But I think it's important to look at cancer and know that cancer is many types of diseases. It's not a single disease. And so we have to know the subtleties of the differences between all those cancer types, including their treatment, the symptoms that people have when they first present with their cancer, and then how we continue to follow and support those patients.
And so that disparity, and we're aware of that. Some cancers, of course, don't have as much survivability as others. Leukemia, sometimes you can be treated and survive for a long time. What accounts for that, the disparity? Is it the actual type of cancer or the lack of treatments? What is it exactly?
So traditionally, we've divided cancer based on where the cancer initially occurs. But I think with time, we're learning that it's much more complicated than that, and that actually there's genetic mutations that are shared between, say, breast cancer and colon cancer. The more we learn, the more we realize how complicated this really is. And we are finding more and more information to the point that we're actually walking on a bridge as we're building it in terms of approaching with new tools.
So just discovering as we go along. And Kate, in thinking about this long-term impact of surviving cancer and that people, a lot of people are living longer, I've heard the term sequela. What does that mean? That's a hard term. I would give that to you. All right, Dr. Rowland, what does that mean?
For me, that's the consequences of cancer, and that encapsulates broad aspects, including physical, social, how that's impacted your job, your ability to function, how you identify yourself, and what brings your life meaning.
Then let me continue with you then. Then how did cancer impact you? How did it change your life?
It changed my life in a lot of different ways. I took on a different career, had volunteered for ACS and became a staff person, and that led me to a whole different aspect of looking at my cancer survivorship.
And we'll have to end on this, and I'll, Dr. Rowland, speaking from personal experience, I'm a 3-year cancer survivor from breast cancer, and after treatment is finished, you experience this sort of just abrupt stop of having all this medical attention and these daily meetings. And you can be left with this worry that your cancer is going to come back. If I eat this, if I drink this, what's going to cause it to come back? But I understand that you have a new after cancer survivor guide that you're involved with. Can you tell me about that?
So across the nation, there's a focus on survivorship and developing guidelines and how we follow patients longitudinally. And a lot of that is just becoming informed, knowing what your resources are, and staying connected, but not totally overwhelmed with information, because we really want people to live life and check in every once in a while, but not let it totally rule their life.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Dr. Eric Rowland and Kay Clark, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up tonight on KPBS, Cancer, the Emperor of All Maladies. It airs at 9 tonight and continues tomorrow. They say they're carrying on the legacy of Cesar Chavez, a coalition of farm workers and state leaders, demanding statewide reform for pesticides used on California crops. They are targeting chloropicrin, which is commonly sprayed on strawberries. Experts say it has been linked to increased rates of cancer. There are mandatory air buffers to protect farming communities, but some experts say the buffers need to be bigger. A Baja California farm workers strike is winding down after growers agreed to increase wages by 15%. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero says the strike has damaged production of strawberries bound for the U.S.
The farm workers pick strawberries, tomatoes, and cucumbers in an agricultural valley called San Quintin, which ships most of its produce to the U.S. For days, thousands of laborers refused to harvest crops as they negotiated with government and industry officials about their wages. Most have returned to the fields now that growers have offered them a 15% daily wage increase. But industry officials say half of the region's strawberry harvest rotted in the fields during the strike. Most of those strawberries were going to be exported to the U.S. The value of the damage to agricultural production amounts to tens of millions of dollars. At first, protesters were demanding that daily wages rise to 300 pesos, or about $20, but they finally agreed to take about $13 a day instead. Before, they were getting around $7 a day. The national minimum wage is less than $5 a day. The farm workers have also been protesting alleged workplace abuses such as sexual harassment and child labor. Mexico's National Commission of Human Rights says it's investigating. State officials say agricultural and economic activities have almost completely returned to normal. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
Today's state holiday honors the work of civil rights activist and labor leader Cesar Chavez. Peggy Pico continues our coverage of farm workers' conditions then and now.
Cesar Chavez was born on this day in 1927. From age 10, he worked as a migrant farm worker. As an adult, he was a labor activist who fought to end racial discrimination, improve farm workers' rights, wages, and social equality. I'd like to welcome my guest, Luis Guerra with United Farm Workers, and Enrique Morones, founder of Border Angels, a local nonprofit that supports human rights. And Luis, how does the striking farm workers today in Baja compare with the movement in the U.S. that Cesar Chavez was involved in?
You know, Cesar Chavez really started in the 60s, a movement that was all about equality and respect of people. One of my favorite quotes from Cesar is, "It's not about grapes or lettuce, it's about people." So what we're seeing right now in Baja is very similar to what's actually still going on in this country, and people are just asking for better wages and for respect to be able to support their families.
How involved is United Farm Workers with the current strike in Baja?
We really believe in a movement that involves the local leadership and the local farm workers themselves. So we're there, you know, as supporters in solidarity and observing, but we're just there to help guide conversations, not to make any major decisions.
And Enrique, you were with Border Angels. How does Border Angels help farm workers?
The Border Angels actually started with the farm workers in Carlsbad back in 1986. These same type of farm workers, strawberry pickers, tomato pickers, their living conditions were horrendous. They weren't being paid fair wages, just like what's happening today in Baja and continues to happen in the United States. There's been improvements thanks to the great leadership of Cesar Chavez, but we still have a long ways to go. That's why it's so important that we all remember that we can all help with the process, be respectful of what the farmers in Mexico are asking for. Let's see how we can support them. We have met with them. We've had people with them in Baja California, and we will continue to support them and support the United Farm Workers with their petition on the farm worker issue in Baja.
Well, let me just dig a little deeper on farm worker conditions in the U.S. in San Diego County and Imperial County today. What are they like today?
They've had some improvements, but they have a long ways to go. We were in Imperial County just yesterday. We were with the farm workers in Baja on Sunday. The conditions that they live in, the lack of water, the lack of appropriate housing. We've had a lot of people here in California die because they weren't allowed to get a drink of water. This is still happening today in California. People seem to think that it's always them, the other. It's us. President Obama once said something very prolific, which I always remember. Before we were us, we were them. We've all been in this type of a situation. Maybe it wasn't us. Maybe it was your Italian ancestors a couple of 100 years ago. Let's remember that. Thanks to the work of the farmers, we have food on our table. And let's honor those people. Let's honor the salts of the earth who are the farm workers.
So in going with that, Luis, what would you say would be some of the first challenges that need to be tackled for farm workers for getting their conditions or their wages? Where would you head first with that?
You know, we make like I mentioned, we make all our decisions really from what we hear from the workers themselves. And something that goes across all the working conditions is a lack of legal status. So right now there's an estimated 2.4 million farm worker population in the U.S., and we're estimating that about 50 to 70% of them don't have legal status, meaning they're undocumented. So we are continuing to fight for immigration reform and figuring out ways to encourage our families to have access to other services.
And I want to follow up. This has to be our last question, Enrique. So Cesar Chavez died in 1993. What kind of impact do you think he still has today?
Cesar Chavez is an American hero. He was a veteran. He was in the U.S. Navy. His impact is felt every day with the youth. The Cesar Chavez legacy will live on forever. And let's not forget, this is the most powerful state in the Union, California, the 7th most powerful economy in the world. And the #1 industry is agriculture. And I would say it's closer to 80% of the workers are undocumented. Let's create a system in which we have an opportunity to let them get in line, live in a humane situation like Cesar Chavez taught us.
All right. All right. Enrique Morones and Luis Guerra, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peggy.
I'm Judy Woodruff on the next News Hour. A shocking new way to get smarter by literally electrifying your brain. That's Tuesday on the PBS News Hour.
Quick update tonight. Remember this cute little cub? The 2-week-old Jaguar did another weigh-in today at the San Diego Zoo. A routine vet exam revealed the cub weighs just under 5 pounds. Also, we found out today that the cub is a boy. As for what to call him, zookeepers are still trying to figure out what to name him. A final salute at the San Diego Naval Base today. Hundreds turned out to bid farewell to the USS Peleliu. Today's decommissioning ceremony marked the end of 35 years of service. The so-called Iron Nickel traveled more than 1 million nautical miles. It's been deployed on humanitarian and peacekeeping missions. The next stop for the Iron Nickel, Pearl Harbor. That's where it will join the Navy's reserve fleet. Well, we are looking for some gusty winds tonight for the desert. A low pressure system moving inland to the north may bring strong winds up to 35 miles per hour. That wind advisory is up. Partly cloudy at the beaches with 70s and 80s over the next few days. A gradual warming trend expected inland as well. Sunny and mild in the mountains with temperatures there in the 60s. As for the desert, toasty, 90s. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.